Hey everybody, and welcome to Last Week from the Table for June 16th, 2020. I'm your host, DM Gallibond. How's everybody doing tonight? Alright, it's Tuesday, the 16th of June, and we are here for our weekly summary discussion wrap up of the games that I run on Roll20. So let's get started. All right, on Thursday nights, we do the Sword Coast Chronicles. That's Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv/Gallibond. Sword Coast Chronicles is kind of like that English class that you took freshman year of college. It's a survey of, in this case, a survey of the published uh, campaigns for 5e, D&D 5e. As I looked through all of these campaigns and I started looking at some of the backstories and comparing information, and I looked for lore that they had on the Wizards of the Coast website, I realized that in the timeline that the Wizards of the Coast people had, these things are all happening very close together in time, and also very close together, relatively speaking, geography, all on that Sword Coast, sort of the western coast of the continent of Faerun in the Forgotten Realms. So there's something that is just causing this upheaval of all this chaos. I mean, you've got dragons, a cult of the dragon trying to, do some stuff. You've got the giants, the ordning of the giants is splitting up. You've got somebody trying to summon demons into the Underdark. You've got a resurgence in the cults dedicated to the elemental evil. All this stuff is going on, and not to mention Sararak and building his temple of or tomb of annihilation um, down in Chult, at the south end of the continent. But it's just all this stuff is happening, and so I was thinking, why is all this stuff happening at relatively the same time? And the timeline works out that you could have a single party that kind of experiences multiple of these events as they are going along. So I put together a timeline that it, by necessity, it kind of changes the start dates on some of these a little bit, but I'll do it. So that this one party actually gets to go through different elements of all of these campaigns, and they eventually discover that it's not happenstance that they're all happening. There's some orchestrating force behind it. And as they learn more and more about things going on, they will eventually reveal that force. And then, of course, they have to decide what they want to do about that. So we just had session 2 of this campaign, and the party is still on the caravan headed east out of Baldur's Gate. They made it as far as the spring equinox. So they started off on the 1st of Ches, and they reached the 19th of Ches, where they got into one of the little towns on the road. And there was a festival in the town to mark the spring equinox. So, of course, I had them go through a skills challenge. Most of the players in this game have not been with me through a skills challenge, so it was a good chance to introduce that. There was also a new player who joined the campaign, somebody who hadn't been able to play the last couple of weeks during character creation and the first session. So he was able to join us on Thursday night for this session. So everybody had a chance to roll some dice. We got a little story time in. There was some some things happening on the caravan, and then we are going to be heading on towards the rest of the route next week. Who knows? They might get somewhere where something else might happen next week. I'm kind of hoping they will. In fact, I think I'm gonna speed up, skip a few days so that we can get them to where I want them to be to start next session. Because as of this time, they know where they are and they kind of know the general lay of what's going on, but they're not 100% sure what they're actually in for yet. So maybe by the third session, we can reveal that to them a little bit. All right, and on Sunday afternoons at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, it's the Walker of Waterdeep. Now it's possible that the time for this may be adjusting slightly, but um, that will probably be. I've discussed it with my players, and most of them seem to be up for it. We have one player that we need to hear back from, see how it would affect him. But we'll, if anything, if it does change, it'll just shift ahead a half hour. So we would start at 2 p.m. instead of 2:30 p.m. That would be the major change. So not a big change, but just a slight change in the starting time. This game is also on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Gallibond on Sundays, and this is my Planeswalking homebrew, uh, big game where we combine the lore of Magic the Gathering and monsters and items and spells and locations out of Magic the Gathering, and we put them in a 5e campaign. Right now, the party is in Innistrad, a land that is overrun by undead and vampires and werewolves and all kinds of nasty stuff. There's even some lore that suggests, and this is officially Magic the Gathering, or this is officially Wizards of the Coast lore, that suggests that Innistrad might have been the original plane that King Barov came from. Who is King Barov? Well, King Barov was the king whose eldest son was a great general named Strahd von Zarevich, um, who now rules the demiplane of Barovia and is the vampire lord Strahd. So there's some suggestion that Innistrad is even possibly the birthplace of, um, Ravenloft, or the characters that inhabit the world of Ravenloft. So that's kind of a cool thing that we can play with a little bit. But my characters are 7th level now, and they have just been at the town of Gatstaff, where they originally came to look for some help going to a mine and getting some rare materials that they needed out of the mine. However, when they got there, they found that the place was under siege by a band of brigands who were a little bit more than brigands, because they actually all turned out to be werewolves. And they were in the nest of the werewolves at the end of last session. So this session, they started there. They had more fights with some of the werewolves, and they, they got done fighting that one group that they were with, and they decided they all needed to go and rest. So they went and they rested, and they found a couple of people that were sleeping off a drunken drunken night of carousing, and one of them was a person that our new character Erik recognized. Erik is the bellman who plays the Carillon there in the little town of Gatstaff. And Eric recognized this fella as somebody who was generally a nice kid, but a little bit of a mischief maker. And he was completely drunk and so out of it. Um, but you know, the party used some scare tactics and some illusionary stuff, and they kind of got him awake enough to answer some questions, and they realized that he um, had joined this group of brigands only after he had been bitten by one of the other werewolves. So he couldn't go home because he was afraid of what might happen if he transformed. And he didn't want to leave the town because, of course, you go out into the middle of nowhere in Innistrad, and that's bad news for anybody. I don't care what you are, vampire or werewolf. If you're out there by yourself, you're in deep caca, as they say. So the the cleric of Moradin in the party actually cast Greater Restoration on him, and using a Pearl of Power, cast Greater Restoration and cured him of his lycanthropy. And so once he was cured, then he wanted to go home. So they all said, "Well, you go home, but you lay low. We're gonna figure out what's going on here." And he told them a little bit about how to find a leader, where the leader was, and um, a little bit about the layout of the rest of the place. And so he did make himself useful, and then he ran on off. So they finished up their rest, and while they were just about finished with the resting, they somebody found evidence of their handiwork. Now, they had been clever in that they took that other unconscious drunk guy that they had found and they set him up with a weapon and made it look like he had gone crazy and killed all of his fellow werewolves. So when the patrol came through and found that, um, they went running to the leader who came in, and the leader sent everybody out trying to look for that, and so he started stalking around and everything. And when the party realized that they had him alone, they decided they were going to go and attack him. And the cleric said, "Oh, well, Greater Restoration worked on the other guy. Let me try Greater Restoration on this guy." And so he cast the Greater Restoration spell on the leader. And sure enough, he changed from a werewolf hybrid form, but instead of turning into a human, he turned into a green slod instead. And so they had to fight the green slod. Now, they're a party of 7th level, very powerful characters, and this leader had made the boneheaded mistake of allowing himself to be on his own and not have his bodyguards or other werewolves around to protect him. So they kind of made mincemeat of him. Um, they essentially got the drop on him on initiative, and then one of the characters who's able to stun landed a stunning strike on him and took him out of commission for a round, and that gave everybody else advantage. And at that point, he was, when his turn came around, he couldn't do anything. And then between that turn and the next turn, they just took him down. And so by the time the other werewolves heard the commotion and came running, they saw that their leader had not only been slain, but was this big, huge, crazy monstrosity, and that freaked them out. And so the party basically threatened them, okay, leave town, never come back, or we're going to kill you right now. And so they opted to leave, all except one who they, again, the Carillon player, recognized as someone who has been implicated and, pretty much assured has been guilty of a number of rapes and murders and um, other serious crimes in the town. So they decided that while they were there, they might as well pass sentence on the guy, and so they took care of him as well. Um, and they also found some hostages, a woman and her two children who had been kidnapped after her husband had been murdered. So they were still alive, and they rescued them, and they found a nice little cache of treasure that the leader had in his personal quarters. So that was this week's session. Next week, hopefully, they will be able to get back on track and head towards the mine that they're trying to get to. All right, now normally those are the two games, and this would be where our session ends. However, this coming week, there's something special. Okay, on Saturday, and you'll notice there's some question marks here because it's a little bit up in the air exactly when this is going to happen. I have written a brand new one-shot D&D game for 5e called Land of Contagion. It's kind of ripped from the headline meets zombie apocalypse meets escape room type of 5-act one-shot game designed to be played in 4 hours. And it was commissioned by and written for an online convention called Glitch Expo. And they, asked me, they asked me to tell them what time I wanted to do that, which I did. And I haven't heard anything back from them. And when I look at their website, it's still just a link tree. They don't even really have a finished website yet, and their link tree is still still asking for people to be panelists and presenters and cosplayers and everything. So I quite honestly don't know if this is actually going to happen or not. My intent is, since I've gone ahead and written this, and I would probably like to go ahead and present it anyway on Saturday. So I think the time that I asked Glitch Expo for, if this all comes together and they go forward and I get the time I want, it's going to be around 4 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Time on Saturday. If I don't hear anything from them, then I will probably pick a time, 3 or 4 on Saturday, and run it then. And do it on my Twitch channel. So that's basically where it will be. And I did another original one shot back in April for a convention called COVIDCon. There's this convention coming up, and then the organizers of COVIDCon have said that they are planning to do something around the time that normally DragonCon would be, because DragonCon has decided to cancel completely this year instead of going virtual. So COVIDCon was probably going to do another event to be somewhere in that time space. So, um, by the end of the summer, maybe I will have done 3 or 4 of these one shots. So look for that information. Watch the social media platforms you'll see in the description of the video. You'll see how you can follow me on all of my social media platforms and everything. So watch that space for all the information on that. All right, everyone. I think that this is going to do it. Everybody take care. Have a wonderful week. Hopefully, we will see you tomorrow for Arcane Wednesday. Not, we'll see you back here next week for Tales from the Table, and hopefully, we'll have a recap of the Land of Contagion game. See how that went. And as we do every week, we'll just close by reminding you to always try to make your D&D games memorable so that you can have tales from your table that you can share as well. Good night, everybody.